Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with Louis D'Souza and Amy Blackford, and this is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. We have a number of little topics we're going to address, and some carryover from last week, something new for this week, a little of this, a little of that. It's kind of like having a pile of presents at Christmas, and you get to open one present at a time.
I was just getting ready to say that.
So, okay, well, I'm going to start off actually with an Abraham Hicks quote. We don't really do those very often, but this actually comes. I don't know if either of you guys get the Abraham Hicks emails that get sent out on a daily basis. I've been getting those for a few years, and I still get those. And today's, I thought, might be a good one for stimulating conversation. So here's what it says. It says, leverage your time more by spending a little more time every day imagining and a lot less time every day doing. Do a little more imagining and a little less doing, until eventually most of what's happening is happening in the cool, calm, anticipatory state. Just imagine yourself into the successes and watch what happens. Imagine a little more and act a little less. So what do you guys think?
I think that's fantastic, and it's the exact opposite way that I operate. So I'm going to take that into account. I am in my head, and I'm an Imagineer. I call myself an Imagineer since I am an author. I am in my imagination a lot. However, I definitely take more action in a day than I'm in my imagination.
Well,
what about you, Louis?
I'm completely the opposite. My wife says I need a little more action in my life.
Oh, that's awesome.
I do a huge amount of visualizing, and things just tend to go very smoothly, and I just leave it at that.
That's great.
Well, then you are a living example then of what they're talking about.
I suppose so, in some respects. This is a good example. We were driving down. We're trying to help the neighborhood, so we were going to. What we did. Clean up some leaves and cut some branches off on a path that was getting a bit overcrowded, and the local council's gone bust, and we knew if we asked them it's never going to happen. So we just went down, and as I took the Jaguar down, it's very close to my house. It's like a stone's throw literally away if you take the shortcut path down. And I said to my wife, I don't want to park here because I've got to find here before. And she said, no, don't worry, we're just going to be very quick. So we went down there, got the leaves up, and started taking back to my car. And when I get back to the car, there's a fine already on my windscreen. And I'm going, what? I didn't hear, I didn't feel, I didn't sense nothing, absolutely nothing. And my wife says, damn, but you're a fast manifester. And I'm like going, and she's going, yeah, you're a very good manifester. And,
yes.
You really have to be careful after a while, everything.
It's right. Things become more instantaneous.
Takes effect.
Yeah. I'll never forget when I first watched The Secret, even though it's not something I reference all that much, how they said you want that lag of time. You wouldn't want to just imagine something and have it show up, immediately. You kind of want that little bit of space of time. So it sounds like you really kind of narrowed that gap.
Yeah, the gap does get narrower, and you really are more aware and more aware and more aware of what you're thinking, because, start manifesting. So
it manifests.
The interesting thing was I was actually getting quite annoyed by the whole thing. I was really getting annoyed. And then my wife says to me, smiles at me and says, yeah, you just proved how fast and good a manifester you are. And I was like, my whole world is spinning from anger, frustration to, she's got a point.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good to get me to go from one vibration to another. It was very useful.
I get the feeling actually that probably most people have the kind of experience you're talking about. It's just that since most people, to the extent that they do any imagining at all, are focusing their attention on stuff they typically don't like. That's what most of our culture does a large chunk of the time. And that's the stuff that shows up quickest. And then they get upset about that. They don't really realize, look what I did.
Right. People are really quick to claim when something happens that they enjoy.
Right.
They're like, oh, I created that. That's mine. But when things show up that they don't like, they're very quick to dismiss it or be what I would call a victim to it. And so the key really when you start learning this stuff.
I'm crap at manifesting. Yeah. Look what I got.
Exactly. The key with this stuff too.
You're actually quite good at it.
You have to understand is when your life is filled with a bunch of things that you don't like and that you don't prefer. I call, that was my teenager. When your life is filled with a bunch of things that you don't like and you don't prefer because you did place them there and you keep reacting to them, you kind of doom yourself to this endless cycle. So in the beginning, when you learn the law of attraction and the power of your own mind, the real key, and it really is the warrior level that I will call it, is having a bunch of things that you don't like or prefer and turning inward and using your imagination. And I don't want to say being in denial of what's there, but you have to quit reacting to it so that you can start seeing that external landscape change. Because then it becomes easier and easier to be happy when you're surrounded by a bunch of things that you enjoy. Then it gets a lot easier to stay in that good vibration.
It's true. Of course, what you're talking about here.
Momentum of more positive vibration.
Yeah, right. That too, right? Yes, exactly. What you're bringing up here, though, is very,
let's all talk
very
together.
much related.
Come on, let's go for it.
Okay, let's go. We can do that. All together now. Ready?
One, two, three.
But it reminds me, though, of the email that you sent us, Amy, where you were saying, well, let's discuss this particular topic, because the topic was things are going to get much worse before they get better, which is a very commonly held belief system, not just by people who are into conscious creation, but just generally. I mean, I think probably the funny joke that I've heard that kind of it's been kind of spread around on social media is the person who says, yeah, I'm really looking forward to New Year's Eve because I want to make sure 2020 goes behind us.
Right.
It's that kind of an attitude, right?
Absolutely. And it is one of those things, when it rains, it pours. There's all of these kind of sayings, and they are really ingrained. The reason that it goes that way is because you think something more bad is going to happen, or you're reacting to that negative thing happening. So yes, more negative things happen. So there's as many beliefs as there are. People revalidate them because they're believing them and they are making them reality. So what we had touched on to end yesterday that I just feel is really important for our audience and for people to bring out there is, I have done a lot of studying into parallel realities. I've experimented with this in my life. And a lot of people will say, well, what does that mean? What I'm saying here is there isn't any one timeline. There isn't any one set future. And I know that David, the stream, also talks about this. When people want predictions, he refuses to give them because there's too many variables and choices that need to be made. And there's a spectrum of possibilities. There's endless possibilities of where Earth is going right now and our country. We could talk about just America, but to me, we're kind of reaching a global network here. Louis doesn't even live in America. So we are talking on a planetary scale. There's a version of Earth that is going to continue to degrade, become more polluted, being taken over by what people are calling the dark forces. And there is that spectrum of the planet or frequency that does exist. And if that's what you focus on and you find articles to validate and you're just so certain that's what's going to happen, that is the timeline or the probable version of Earth you're going to end up and find yourself on. And then you can say, hey, I was right. And then there's the opposite of that. There's a much higher version of Earth. People will call it 5D Earth, whatever, that we're ascending. It's really just a higher version of Earth where, we're working more in harmony with the environment, where things like this virus are getting taken care of rapidly, where humans are working together in cooperation, and we're using the law of attraction and really tapping into what I would call, some people call superhuman, but it's really just our powers that we've forgotten that we have. And that version of Earth also exists. And right now, I believe the pandemic is a perfect time for our audience and any of their friends that want to listen to this stuff. What version do you want to experience? Do you want it to get worse? Do you want to be trapped inside longer? Do you want to see more death? Because if that's what you continue to focus on, that is what you're going to experience. Now, people might get aggravated at hearing me say that, like, oh, my thoughts are going to generate this negative reality. That reality already exists. With your thought, you are aligning to that parallel version of what's happening right now. So if you want to see things get better, you've got to start picking out the things that you see people helping each other, like we talked about last week, more community, and all of the positives that are actually coming out of the pandemic. If you do that, you're going to start experiencing a reality of this timeline that gets increasingly better. And I'll even take it a step further and say, we're at a switch point right now. Right now, there's a lot of chaos and confusion because there's a lot of people on the planet that want real change, and they feel it and they're aligned with it. And then there's a lot of people that don't. At a certain point, I feel like when there's a big enough consensus reality that's aligning with a higher version, we go off in another bubble reality, parallel version that will no longer be overlaid with the one that we're experiencing right now. And so on our timeline, things will increasingly get more positive, and you'll know which track you're on because they're either getting better or they're getting worse. And you have the power to decide which way do you want to go. And you get to make that choice every single day when you wake up. And the more you make that right choice, this is where I want to go, instead of this is some runaway train that I'm stuck on, the more ability you have to get to the destination that you want to arrive at. And I just thought that was it's something that I've written. I wrote a YA for the viewers or listeners that don't know this. 4 years ago, I wrote a book. It's for young adults. It's a science fiction thriller, and the theme is a pandemic. And the entire story, my protagonist she sees a vision of the future, and she has 6 days to prevent this pandemic from happening. And she is exploring parallel realities in which she's trying to get her audience to focus on the desired outcome as opposed to what they've been told is going to happen. And so I feel almost obligated, and like I want to bring this message out because, this is a platform for me to do that. So focus on what you want, folks. That's what I'm really trying to say here.
Okay. Did you want to add something to it, Louis?
I mentioned to you a little bit earlier that last week we were talking about hypnotism. And I said I went over the week and I had a look at some Abraham Hicks points of view on hypnotism. So, and it fits in perfectly what Amy's saying. So this hypnotist comes to the stage and he says to Abraham, I've been having tremendous results helping people sort through all their problems in childhood with hypnotism. So Abraham says to him, the way they put it was quite funny. It was like, so you want to go into what they didn't want and what they didn't like when they were young, so that you can go into what they do like, so they can get over what they didn't like to get to where they do like, or something like that. And the guy says, yes. And then Abram says, well, do you understand that in your life, nothing is stopping you getting to source? There's no doorway stopping you getting to your own source.
Hey, Louis, I'm going to interrupt you because we got an audio problem coming from your end.
I was noticing that too.
Yeah, your voice is getting rather garbled there, so you might want to double check your mic setup just to make sure everything's good. But while you're doing that, I'll just make a couple of points.
Checking,
of my own.
1, 2, 3. Checking.
Yeah, testing. Yeah, I'm not sure what that was.
Let me see.
Oh, that's better.
That's better.
Whatever you did is better.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know what I did. As long as that's good. Just focus on what I wanted.
There you go.
So Abram was saying, you've got your source. Is anything blocking you to the hypnotherapist? Is anything blocking you getting to your source? Is there a door or is there something there blocking you? He said, no, there's nothing. So it says, why do you think there's something blocking these people getting to their source? And I really thought that was a great way of trying to understand the idea that there is nothing blocking you getting to your source, and other than thoughts that you're thinking that there's something blocking you. There's nothing blocking you getting to your source. That's and it really is the same point that Amy's trying to get across there. And it was fascinating because this guy really wanted to argue for his hypnotherapy and his method. And Abraham says, well, if it's working for you, it's great. There's no problem. As long as you're focused on the ease with which you are in your source, which you can allow that other person to lean on that vibration to get to theirs. And know that there is actually no obstacle there at all. There's no obstacle getting to your source. Source is always present, always there, always powerful, always with you.
Have you ever heard of Bashar? He calls them permission slips, and I really like this. Daryl Anika, he channels Bashar. And I really love, he goes into the parallel realities, and he does talk about that. He calls them permission slips, meaning for one person, hypnosis, it's not that the hypnosis is the magic bullet. It's a permission slip for the person to go into that state to get the information that they need. And like what you're saying, Louie, there is no one mode or modality for anyone to discover and uncover their own power. We're all being led into different directions based on our backgrounds and interests. The key is to follow that intuitive pull to certain things. For some reason, for some, it might be reading tarot cards. Another person, it might be traveling the world and finding God on the top of a mountain. There's so many different, are going, and visiting different monasteries. I mean, there are literally lists and lists of ways to find that inner wisdom. And I think we all have that inner compass, and we're all going to have variations. There is no right or wrong way.
When you brought
you know
this
how I
topic
found,
here we go again.
I'll do that. Go on.
I was reminded of two different things. One, you mentioned the movie The Secret previously, and there are a number of quotes from famous people in that movie. One of them seems directly touching what you're talking about. It comes from Henry Ford. Ford apparently said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, either way, you're right.
You're right. Yeah.
And that kind of summarizes what you were talking about. The other thing that came to my mind was a conversation that I saw in a Neville Goddard group on Facebook. Somebody had raised a question about, well, what happens if you have two different people who want to have a result in the stock market, and what they want are opposite of each other? Which one's going to win? And my response to him was both, because stock prices never stop at one price. They go up, they go down, they go up, down, up, like minute by minute, second by second, they can change depending on how frequently the stock has changed. So they can both get their result. It's not
and again, people are basing that on there's some one set linear reality. Not only do we have our own reality bubble that we're creating, literally. So one person can be living in the same city, same neighborhood, and have a completely different experience than somebody living next door to them, right? Or even in the same family dynamic. So when you start talking about things like this, that's what people still are not wrapping their mind around. They think there's limited resources. They think there's only one set linear reality. And folks, it's really exciting news. And I know it's kind of mind blowing if you've never been exposed to this, but that's not how this works. And I'm saying this from years and years of practicing it, experimenting with it. I call my life as like a little science experiment. It's playing with these different concepts and really seeing, it's like my homework, and I'm seeing what really works.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I love that idea that you can experiment with it. I learned from a very young age that I had my body and I could experiment with it. And believe me, you can ask Walt. I've done a lot of experimentation with my own body.
Just a tad, yes.
I realized nobody can take it away from me. Nobody could take my chemistry lab or my, and it's the same with studying LOA. Nobody can take it away from you. Once you're in that groove, you put in the thought processes, you're in alignment with it. You feel the shift and the move. You go from hope to expectation to the joy of it, and it just starts manifesting, and you're just in the zone, and you just say, I know this works. There's no doubt in my mind.
It's like any craft.
A million people try and disprove the law of attraction to me. Means nothing. Actually, if they try to disprove it, they're
going to prove themselves right. So it's like with any craft, I try and tell people, you don't become a great painter by reading how to paint. You paint. I'm not saying that reading and gaining knowledge isn't important. It was. I went and I got a 4-year degree in art, and some of that involved reading, but then it was also application. So it's getting the knowledge, and then getting to a certain point though where you've got to apply it and see what really syncs with you and what doesn't. And when you apply it and you see it working, that's where wisdom comes from. So you can have all the knowledge in the world until you actually start applying it and watching it work in your life. It means nothing. It's just useless information.
Lots of it too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
I mean,
God.
if you think about it, I often ask people, I say to them, what have you created that's unique?
I
What have you
mean,
created that's absolutely unique?
yeah, I think my
What has
stories are
nobody else in the
my
world
art.
created? Something that
Right.
you've done that's completely unique.
Right.
And a lot of people just get totally stumped on that because most of the time we're just regurgitating previous
Yes.
stuff which we've heard or learned or been told or picked up, etc. And we're not coming up with anything unique. And the guys that come up with unique things like light bulbs or this or that, or Einstein, etc., they will tell you they've had these dreams or these visions or these somethings where
Yes.
they've tapped into that higher power and managed to bring that into the reality. And you'll watch a lot
You're
of people I'm
channeling.
reading out there at the moment. The guys that are bringing in good stuff, new stuff and unique stuff, shall I say, not necessarily good for anybody or everybody, but it's really to do with tapping into source, and you really
Right.
start getting the idea that you want to be this conduit of
Yes.
source energy, and you get that alignment right, and you're on the track to manifesting much quicker and easier.
All
Even
wonderful.
fun.
Like all of
Yeah.
my favorite artists, whether they're musicians, writers, it doesn't matter. We all say the same things. I have the same experience where I had to hone the craft. I had to show up and write a bunch of books before I could really write a powerful novel. This newest one that I've completed. It's my 7th novel. So I had to show up to hone my like to become the conduit. But then there's that part of me for great work to come out is I had to get my ego, me out of the way. So I prepared the vehicle, but then I kind of handed over to channel and these stories come through. So when, of course, I'm in the middle of being quarantined in a pandemic and I'd written about a pandemic 4 years before it happened with the same symptoms and all this craziness, part of me was surprised and part of me wasn't, because I've always said I'm not even the one writing really the story. I'm just documenting this kind of idea that's coming through me. And that's what it is. And that's what makes it so unique, being creative. There's a wonderful book. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it actually teaches people how, it's a 12-week course, and it teaches people how to open to their creativity. And this isn't just for, some people categorize art, you paint, you write, you're a musician. But she said gardening, cooking. There's all different ways of expressing God. Good orderly direction is what she calls God. The universe, whatever, your higher self, however you want to put it, it doesn't matter. But when you tap in creatively, what it is, it's really, you're tuning in, and it's like a very long meditation with your eyes open. And so it really does recharge you. It fills you with energy. So that's the main reason I show up to write every day. The finished product takes so long to get to for me that I do it because of that buzz that I get from doing it.
Well, yeah. I mean, that goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show when we brought in the Abraham Hicks quote that talked about imagining more often and doing less often. When you're doing less often, when you're imagining more often, the doing becomes easier. That's what you're describing. You're describing doing becomes simple. Doing only gets really difficult when we just stick with do. Then we just kind of wear ourselves down. I'm really good at that one, by the way. But
well, it's like a battery not being plugged in, it wears out. But when you're tapped in, it's an endless energy supply that you're getting. And so, yes, that's why time will pass. I will forget to eat. When I'm in the creative zone, it literally feels like I'll look up whether it's a drawing or a piece of writing, and just hours will have gone by. And it's because it's putting me in that space that is not in time. It's kind of outside of time.
Mentioning the idea about imagining. We're good at this, I have to say.
Nah.
I think we should all have a skill, and here's our skill, But I'll defer this time.
Yes.
Well, you go this time. I went last time, so it's your turn.
Yeah, somebody was saying, everybody's looking for longevity, wants to live forever, and says, well, when you're having fun, time passes quickly, doesn't it? So get in a bad mood, do all the bad things and horrible things, you'll live for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was laughing and laughing and laughing.
Oh,
It really made me think for a while. Yeah.
I mean, it's anything that you get very focused upon, whether it's something that you like or don't like, you're going to get that result. From my perspective, I'm just going to I'm going to pursue something on the side of what I prefer, what I like, just because
Absolutely.
I'm finding that's a lot more fun. It's a lot more interesting and a lot less boring. When I pursue the other side, it's like, oh God, please get me out of here. I can't take this
we've all
anymore.
had those horrible jobs when I was younger, and I would just sit there watching the clock. I couldn't wait for it to be over and done. And to spend your entire life living that way is a real shame. Yeah.
Touch those cards, right? Oh my goodness, craziness. We had another message from Sarah, and this is a message she left on one of our YouTube episodes, YouTube recordings of episodes, because we record there in addition to just regularly recording our podcast.
Okay, great.
And it tied in, it didn't tie into the last show that the three of us did. It tied into a show that we did later on last week about the nature of physics, and specifically the nature of the ascending reticular activating system, the part of the brain where we filter out or filter in, depending on how you want to look at it. We filter our world because our five senses take in so much data that if we had to process all of that data and do something with it, we would be insane. Yeah, it'd just be too much. But the filtering makes it possible for us to do that. And then we gave the classic example to demonstrate how it works of buying the new car. You go to the new car lot, you buy a blue Honda Civic, and then suddenly you see blue Honda Civics everywhere. You didn't see blue Honda Civics before. Yeah, because the filter has just been modified by what we give our attention to. Well, this also ties into how the physics works because of, among other things, the observer effect.
Yes.
Right? And by the way, there's a little sideline. Before I even go on to my point, I want to go on to a tangent.
Okay, you go right ahead. It's your show, Walt.
Well, because I love this tangent. It's really fun. The interesting thing about the observer effect is that those of us who pursue what I'll generically call the woo-woo approach, because that's kind of what we're talking about here. We kind of get poo-pooed by the hardcore mainstream physicists. And one of the things that the mainstream physicists try to do in order to convince the rest of us that we were misinterpreting quantum mechanics was to create an experiment. I believe it's called the Weissman experiment, conducted in 1998, in which they used a device, an electronic detector, to focus, if you will, on two different possible outcomes. The electronic detector made the selection, and that created certain results. So the people behind the experiment said, well, this proves you don't have to have a consciousness present in order for an influence to be made. And I laughed when I heard about that the first time, because the instant thought that came to my mind is, how do you know that the entire world isn't full of consciousness?
Exactly.
And then I finally realized why that they were saying that. They were saying that because the traditional view of science is that only humans have consciousness, and maybe a few mammals to a small degree, but that's about it. That's about as far as most mainstream science is willing to go.
Right.
So basically, they stepped on themselves with their own limited assumptions.
Right.
So they made a machine.
Yeah.
They made a machine that randomly chose outcomes. Is that what happened?
That's their claim, right?
Yeah, but that's a human with a thought process.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, how do you get around that?
Or even now studying those results, they are now the observer of the results.
Yep.
So by default, there has to be something observing.
They're just proving that the law of attraction works.
To my mind, it goes even further than that, because if consciousness is in everything, that means it's in humans, it's in animals, it's in insects, it's in rocks, trees,
anything
sky,
you can perceive. Yeah.
Everything.
Absolutely.
And the way I explain that is, well, we come from the belief system that says this thing that we call source energy is the energy through which and from which everything was created. what some people might call God. I'm okay with that if they want to call it that. Yeah. But source energy, and it's a combination of source energy and consciousness. The two actually go together. You really can't have one without the other. So anytime that you have anything that was turned into matter that originally started as source energy, it was transmuted, if you will, into matter through a conscious focus of some kind. And if it makes a change in some way, maybe it modifies its matter form, or maybe it returns to energy. I mean, that also can happen. Again, it's because of a consciousness that's involved. So consciousness is happening every step of the way.
Agreed.
So the questions I would have for the physicists who want to rule out consciousness except for human consciousness is, if you're going to rule out consciousness except for human consciousness, how do you explain the Big Bang?
Right.
Because I don't see how you can do that.
Right. To us, there is no separation. We're all made of the same stuff.
Yeah, and we're all connected, and
yes.
And consciousness is infinite. You know, so why do we have to limit consciousness? I guess that's part of my question.
That's the human. It's just the human way. We are separate. We are individualized, and until you expand beyond that belief system, we are constantly trying to analyze, compartmentalize, and actually diminish what is or what we understand. And from our mindset, to me, I call it the great mystery. I love the not knowing. I embrace the not knowing. The minute I know everything, what's the point? I might as well just not even incarnate anywhere, just return to the one source or whatever, the big mega computer in the sky, however people want to look at
it. well, as I detailed earlier, that was a tangent. So I want to get back to the original.
It goes right
it was a wonderful
what
tangent.
We're talking about.
I loved it, yeah. But I did want to get back to the point that Sarah had raised, because she was referring to this previous show where we had talked about the ARAS and about the importance of noticing, because that filtering mechanism in the ARAS essentially controls what we're going to notice and what we're not going to notice.
This is true.
More precisely, we control what we're going to notice and what we're not going to notice by what we give our attention to. And that, of course, is where a lot of the conversation that we're talking about here is coming from. This whole idea, well, you know, if you focus on what you don't like, all that kind of stuff.
I'd like to add to that, when you start noticing the messages that are coming through, however you want to label it, I call it my higher self, or some people call it their guides. The messages, the more I focus on them and realize that I'm receiving them, the more I see them. So it's through that observation that they keep popping up, and I feel like I get more clear guidance than even me just following an intuitive feeling. I actually get physical messages sent to me throughout the day, pointing me in the right direction or pointing me away from something. And so it's been a wonderful, the more I observe or notice that I'm getting these messages, the more of them I see.
So this is good. We've actually anticipated Sarah's question. She says in her question, the mention of the world as seen by physics, in which I am only noticing what plays into my story and not noticing certain things that would benefit the quality of my experience, piques my interest. And she asks, please do elaborate in the following show. And thank you very much in advance for doing that. So I guess we're already on doing exactly that, which is good.
Great.
You know, but let's delve into that a little bit. Why is it that we are able, well, I think we know why. What is it that we need to rethink or redo or in some way reconsider in order to notice the stuff that happens? And I think the classic example from my perspective is you're trying to attract something into your life and you don't notice all the things that you're attracting in your other things that you're giving attention to because you're so focused on that one thing that doesn't show up. And then when it does show up, you forgot that you asked for it. And so you don't even notice that you attracted the thing that you were trying to attract. That's what I wanted to address.
It sounds like she's asking to be clear. She wants to know how to have better control over what she's attracting and focusing on, and how does she redirect.
Well, that was actually me. That last bit was me rather than her.
Okay.
Yeah. She's just basically asking us to go into the topic more.
Okay. I think it all comes down to the emotional guidance system, back down to the basics of the law of attraction. When you start not feeling good, you're focusing, whether it's you're thinking about something from the past that's happened, or you're projecting into the future, or you're noticing something externally that's happening in your present moment. When you start not to feel good, whether it's anxiety, anger, depression, you are focused on something that is not going to produce positive results. You're going to get more of that. So for me, when I was really learning this stuff, it came right back down to that basic. How do I feel right now? And if I don't feel good, let me challenge that. Am I thinking about something? Am I noticing something? Am I projecting into the future about something? And that's how I would redirect my focus. And then I would say to myself, okay, Amy, anchor what around you right now can you look at or think about that feels good? And I think it's a really basic way for people, and especially in the beginning stages, you're like, my mind is like a runaway train. How do I get control of this situation? You really just have to start acknowledging how you feel. And the minute you become more and more sensitive to it. You know, when you first start, you might not feel good for 30 or 40 minutes, an hour before you're like, hey, what just caused that? Now for me, it's immediate. The minute I start not feeling good, I will question. And sometimes I want to play it out, and I let myself, I'm human, but I'm at least acknowledging that I'm the one creating that, or I'm the one focusing on or looking at something that I don't like. What do you say, Louis?
Well, you know, I've pointed this out before, but, you know, before we came to this physical universe, we were spiritual. And when we die, we'll be spiritual. So when we come to the physical, we're not here to be spiritual. We already are spiritual. We're here to play with this physical stuff, to play with this physical body, to play with the physical environment, to play with contrast, because that's our teacher. So to me, it's all about what perceives the contrast or perceives life where I am at the moment. And that's my 5 physical senses plus my mind and my emotions. So somebody who can see better than another person, who can see that boat out there in the distance, or who can see that sign in the distance clearer than somebody else, has a better experience of sight, of on one level, on one vibrational interpreting aspect. They have the better ability. Somebody who can feel better, or somebody who reads Braille, etc. They've really got a very, very sensitive fingertips, etc. And they really have a lot more information going in on their fingers. Those people who can feel have a greater experience on that level. So to me, it's all about really enhancing your 5 physical senses to the degree to which you can, so that you can live and perceive and understand life to its absolute fullest, and not use anything that dulls it, that takes away your focus and clarity and your perception and your 5 physical senses and its ability to perceive. So yeah, to me, it's about being awake more often, not sleeping so much. It's about, you know, really finding your passion in life and living it and doing it, rather than, you know, sitting in the background too much and just, you know, let me take some more pills, let me take some more of this, let me do this, you know, and yeah, so I think the only tablet I've ever taken in my life is really, besides the occasional antibiotics when I was a kid and I didn't know any better and I was force-fed it because of my asthma, is a headache tablet, and then I only take a quarter. But, you know, to me, I really want to find any solution, and energy has been a big one, of giving me that clarity and focus and getting rid of any resistances, so that I can live life to a fuller degree.
By the way, Christy in the live stream says she loves your background. She wishes that she was there. So just
go grab Zoom and put it on, and you'll be there. Join us on the show.
That'd be awesome.
But your point is well taken, and the fact is, we do spend a lot of time focused on what we don't want, and we're learning how to focus more often on what we do want. Something else, though, that the stream, you mentioned the stream of David, Amy, a few moments ago, that the stream has really been going out of its way to make a point about, and that is our best thing that we can do in this life is to find ways of appreciating and accepting all the stuff, including the stuff we don't want.
Oh, appreciate
Because when we
embracing
appreciate
the contrast,
embracing the contrast, embracing the stuff we don't like, and finding a way to come to peace to it. Because when we do that,
I see it as a roller coaster. I didn't have the things that I didn't like happen, I would get really bored with everything just being peachy all the time. It just would, to me, it would get, I like the flavor. Now, I'm not saying I definitely enjoy the highlights. They're exhilarating, but I understand the concept. They would not feel exhilarating if I had nothing to compare them to.
I laughed when you said that because the moment I think about going on to a roller coaster is the moment I think about throwing up. So for me, it doesn't have the same kind of association.
I love the way it's different for everybody.
It is.
And I love the thrill or the fear as I'm going up the hill, you know, and then that exhilaration when I'm just zooming down it and I know that I'm fine and I can throw my hands up in the air and it feels like I'm flying. So, but it's the contrast between the two. I don't enjoy a kiddie coaster. It's just going like this. There's no fear involved. So to me, that's why
when you've got kiddies, you have to do that.
Right.
You're going, oh.
Everything was just like this all the time. Nobody wants a lifetime kiddie coaster. We think we do, but honestly, we really don't. However, with that said, as you learn the law of attraction, you have a lot more control over, you can have the contrast, but very quickly move out of it so you're not suffering. Suffering comes from one problem after the other, one challenge after the other, to where you feel very beat down, and life is not fun when you are stuck in that kind of a paradigm, you know? So it's learning how to play with the contrast, like Louis says, and experiencing it, but very quickly being able to shift out of it so that you get the benefit from it without the suffering part.
When you were describing that, it was reminding me about we're in the Christmas holiday season, right? And
yes.
There's a version of the story A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens that was created by the Muppets. And there's a Muppet Christmas Carol, and if you watch that particular movie, at one point, Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghost of Christmas Past are flying over the streets of London with two of the Muppet characters attached to their coattails. And one of the Muppet characters says, "Hello, London, goodbye lunch." It's just like what you're riding on the roller coaster. It's the same feeling, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, okay. Well, that's a good tangent then.
I've got a VR headset and you can do a lot of roller coaster rides with it.
I bet.
You can feel sick standing in your living room.
I think that's a good
really
bring up the holidays, though. This is a time, especially this year, that a lot of people are feeling isolated and sad. And I've noticed there are a lot of people that get very depressed during the holidays. I have some friends that get very down during the holidays for whatever reason, whether it's past family trauma or current family drama, or that they don't have a partner, or whatever it is. It seems to evoke, either people seem to be one way with it where they really love it and are into it, which is my personality. And then there are people that are on the other side of it. So I just want to encourage those people out there that do feel that kind of sadness to find something good to focus on this year, to go out and give, to lift yourself up instead of being pulled into those old negative beliefs and patterns. Try and break yourself free of it. You might really be surprised at what new precedents you can set for yourself. It doesn't always, just because it's always been one way, you don't have to keep reliving it.
Well, don't you think that that's actually an example of why it's so good to focus more of our attention on what we like and less attention on what we don't like? Because among other things, this is what I found anyway, one of the great benefits of doing that is that your sense of self-esteem, self-love, self-confidence increases just by doing that activity. And of course, the great side benefit of increasing self-love, self-confidence, self-esteem is that you start taking more of an interest in other things, in other people. And you start attracting more because you're focusing more on what you like rather than what you don't like. You end up attracting more stuff into your life that you like, which makes life so much more interesting.
You attract the vibration you're at. So
right. I see so many people stuck in just certain ways. I've always been this way. This is the way it's going to be. And so they keep recreating the same unhappy moments for themselves when they don't have to do that.
Because when I was in the sauna the other day, there was this person who was talking about all the negative things going on. And I was saying to them, you do realize that in your world, there's only two things that are giving you any pain or trauma. One of them So about 90% of any trauma anybody's experiencing on any level comes from inside them, not outside.
True.
It's about the thoughts. So you must understand that it's about memory, other things that you've experienced in the past that you're bringing back into the present, or it's your creativity, your other faculty, which can be put into dreaming or focusing on what you want. That capacity that you have is, I don't have a partner, all the things that you put there. It's visualizing possible futures or non-futures or lack ofs. So those two faculties are the only thing that are torturing you. And when you break it down for people, that those two faculties are the most powerful human faculties you have, memory and creative visualization. And if you do not learn to understand their process, how they work, what they're doing for you, it's like coming into this life with your eyes blind and just stumbling around.
Yes.
You need to understand that this is the things that are torturing you. You're doing it to yourself. You're dragging your memories into the present, and they're torturing you, or you're visualizing what you don't have in the future, and that's torturing you. And that's all that's happening, nothing else.
Right. You're using your imagination to bring it back to that, the imagination, instead of using it to create what you do want and feels good, you're using that power to create what does not feel good. And it's all about learning to make that switch. I love how cohesive, even though we had all these different ideas, how they really all did work together in this episode today. No surprise.
What fascinated me in the sauna is watching the individual put the pieces together of their own life and see how the negative things were part of their own thought process, and to see that what they wanted that they couldn't get, or the belief they couldn't get, was torturing them, and they can actually see that as those two aspects in their life affecting them.
Yeah, that's a big deal when you finally get that level of clarity, so that you grasp what it is that you're doing. You grasp what it is that you've been doing and what you can do differently.
That you're your own jailer. It's so realize you've been holding the key all along to let you out of this kind of self-imposed prison.
Because freedom is, I think, probably the greatest gift that we all crave the most. And when we finally realize we can actually gain freedom we didn't think that we had before, that's a breakthrough moment. That's a moment of wonder. Yeah, really, really big deal right there.
It's huge to understand that you can live in the middle of COVID and not be affected by it, or live in the middle of
anything.
A lot of people suffering and not be part of it. It doesn't really matter what it is. You can create your own reality in the midst of anything and everything else.
It's funny too, because with COVID, I have to admit, the only time I'm ever cognizant of COVID, there are two situations when I'm aware of it. One, we go to the grocery store.
Yes.
The other is when we talk about it here on the show, and we talk about it in a way that makes, that kind of turns it on its ear. And so it doesn't have any of the sting attached to it. So, I mean, I have so little, other than that, I have so little association with COVID. It isn't even a part of my mindset anymore.
Right.
But I know people who it's part of their regular mindset.
Absolutely.
Including people who are conscious creators. And that's just because they keep focusing on it.
Yes.
It's almost like I almost want to do what my wife used to do with me years ago when I would get deeply depressed. She would come over to, I was lying on the couch or whatever. She'd come over, straddle me, grab my shirt and say, snap out of it. Because that's what I want to do with them. It's like, say, snap out of it.
This is a wonderful opportunity for everyone to really practice what it is that this entire podcast is focused on, which is mastering your emotions and your thoughts. And when you do, you're going to find you have a lot more control over your external reality than you ever realized.
I think it's important to also remember
control.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's really important to remember too. You don't do it all at once. You don't gain the mastery all at once. It takes time. You have to practice and practice a little more, and then stumble and make some mistakes.
84,000 lifetimes, some say.
Well, okay, if it takes that long, I'm trying to do it a little bit quicker. But
I just want to put it in a different perspective.
I think you have a whole bunch of people who are standing on Suicide Bridge say, okay, I'm jumping now, forget it. I just can't put up with this anymore.
Next lifetime, try again.
That's right. I'll catch you next lifetime. Forget this one. but the fact is, it does take time to learn. It takes time to relearn. Actually, that's what I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about imagination, Amy. The fact is, we are very good at imagination when we're kids. And then as we grow up, it's like life kind of pushes it out of us. You know, we're discouraged from doing that imagining.
You get told very early in, get out of your head, quit imagining, quit being creative. You got to focus on reality. They start training our children very young, you know, in school. And I'm not saying that all of it is being done on purpose, but this is how humans program each other. It's passed down from one generation to the next. And if nobody questions those programs, they just keep getting passed down. And I think that's what we're seeing, why I call it, you know, the Great Awakening on the planet's been happening in waves, is there's a lot of challenging of the old paradigms and belief systems that are going on right now. And I believe we are breaking into a really exciting time, folks. I know it might not seem that way to a lot of others, but I'm feeling really excited about where we're headed. And I think that where we're at right now, that's why I call it a switch point. It's one of those moments of choice where which side of which train track do you want to be on? I think I've picked my side and I'm sticking with it.
It's pretty clear. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about which track you chose.
I think it's also important to explain to people that they can't do it wrong either.
No, not at all.
They're not doing it wrong.
No, nope.
That's true.
There is no wrong choice. You know, there aren't really two tracks. There's 5 billion trillion.
Exactly.
Tracks.
Yes.
And you can play between all of them.
Yes.
And the more you play with the negative contrast, the more you become clear about what you really want. So it's not really, you can't really go wrong.
I agree.
You can frustrate yourself pretty good. You can frustrate yourself pretty good.
You can think you've gone wrong.
Yeah.
You can definitely think you've gone wrong.
Yeah. You can talk yourself into that. Great way to do that is to keep focusing on what you don't like and don't switch over to what you like. Just stay on what you don't like. That'll work real well.
It's really not fun. I will say that ride is definitely not fun. Yeah. Once I really started learning all of this stuff, it was like, I knew there was a better way to be living. And, I can 100% unequivocally say there is.
There was an exchange that I had with somebody who's a new listener, actually. We've answered a couple of questions for her on the podcast. I'm not sure how often she listens, but I know she listens occasionally. But she had raised a question, and I'm not sure I even remember exactly what the question was, but it had to do with dealing with family members, particularly family members who are argumentative or difficult to get along with, or in one way or another are kind of, dumping their opinions and beliefs on her. And her question was essentially along the lines of, how do you deal with people who are kind of forcing you to buy into all those stuff you don't really buy into? And I don't remember all my response because I wrote quite a bit to her, but one piece of my response was, why do you think it's your responsibility to agree with their opinions?
Right.
I mean, everybody, you certainly respect the fact that they have their opinions, but that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And similarly, they don't have to agree with you either. I think we kind of get into these traps that make us believe if we don't behave the way somebody else.
You're so far out. You're so far out of the traps that it's difficult to even perceive what it's like to be in them anymore. I can't. I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody trying to push their opinion on me now, and it's just like, what? It's a joke.
I mean, I've even taken it a step further.
But but some people have got such an active vibration of accepting what other people say and always trying to do and please them and all the rest of it. They got such an active vibration of that to see the side that we're looking from all the time, it's really challenging.
I also feel like I owe family members if they are being aggressive or I'm not enjoying my connection with them. I don't feel any sense of loyalty any longer that I have to tolerate that. Like if I set boundaries and those boundaries are broken constantly over and over, I don't owe anybody I don't owe them my time or my energy. If I don't feel good around you and we are not syncing up, just because we share blood does not mean I have to keep exposing myself to that. And that's one thing that can be a little controversial with people because blood is blood. And I feel completely free of that belief system. I feel like if I'm not saying that everyone in my family needs to agree with me for sure, but I at least need to feel like I want to have a relationship with you and that there's some sort of harmonics there. And if there isn't, I don't feel like I have to continuously expose myself to it either.
Well, and that's why this is such an important point, because we're in the holiday season when people are, families are getting together, particularly more extended family that don't necessarily see each other on a daily basis, although COVID may be knocking that down too. I'm not sure. But the point is, this is a time when that kind of thing can happen. That kind of contributes to what you mentioned earlier about people getting depressed or feeling down or not feeling good about the holiday seasons. That's one of the examples of it. And the simple fact is, I mean, even if you have a situation like you described, Amy, where they're constantly crossing the boundaries, to me, that's an opportunity to practice my boundary making. Because all that means is I didn't set a very strong boundary.
Right.
And all that really means is I didn't make it clear to the other person, you are crossing a line that is unacceptable to cross. Stop.
Exactly. And it's okay to set that boundary and to keep it there.
Yeah. Yeah. The more firm the boundary is, they eventually get to the point where they say, I'm not going to cross the boundary anymore. It's not worth it. You just haven't made it not worth it for them yet.
I just get very clear that I don't need them. They can cross as many boundaries as they want in the way my belief goes. I'm just not going to let it affect me.
Right.
Well, yes, that's a key question.
It has absolutely zero effect on me whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And when it has zero effect, they never continue. They never,
I love it.
Ever continue.
I love it.
I think it actually goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because I think what happened is that early on you did set some boundaries, and for you, the way the boundaries manifested in your own thinking was, I don't give a crap about what they say anymore.
Right.
I'm just not going to give any energy to it at all. And that is a
boundary.
Happy
holidays,
that's a very firm
boundary. From LOA Today. Don't put up with any nonsense this holiday season. Do what makes you happy.
That's a good message.
Wear that Teflon coat somebody told me I was wearing.
Did they really say that? They told you were
wearing
a Teflon
somebody
coat?
said to me, my God, you wear a Teflon coat. I can't believe how thick that coat is.
Goodness.
This was in a work environment many years ago.
That's a pretty good compliment, I would say. Just saying.
I said thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do want to remind people, if you want to have your comment or your question included in the conversation, that's what the LOA Today app is for, because among other things, not only can you listen to past podcast episodes, but there's also a form in the goodies section where you can actually send in a question. You can even focus it to one particular co-host, and I'll make sure that co-host gets that question to answer the next time that they're on the podcast. So take advantage of that, because, quite honestly, we love it when we hear from listeners. First of all, it makes the conversation so much more fun. And second of all, guys, have we ever had a time where we had heard from a listener, we said, oh, geez, I really wish I didn't hear from the listener? That's not the experience. No,
they're all very thoughtful questions.
Yeah, they're great. So, take advantage, do it. I just want to also take a moment. I've been trying to do this with each of my co-hosts this week because as we're recording these, we're coming up on Christmas Day. So I want to take a moment to just wish both of you and your families a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Same to you, Louie and Walt. Thank you so much, and all of our listeners.
We will, of course, be picking up next week.
Yeah, you guys too, and the listeners, absolutely.
Yeah, but this is a beautiful time of year, and celebrate it and enjoy it, and just go with it. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
That's one flow. You don't have to go with all flows. That's a good one, though. Go with that one. I'm just saying.
You know what I loved about the family events, the big family events when I was a kid? Well, it was just sitting there while everybody was talking and just chilling and just feeling the vibe of family.
Yeah.
Right.
So cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's part of this.
Just quietly sitting in a corner and watching the buzz go on all around.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Feel the buzz.
All right. That's a good way to finish it. So thank you, guys. Thank you, live streamers. Thank you, especially to our podcast listeners as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.